And just as an aside, I don't know whether you saw this week, First Direct announced that they're going to do a brand new regular saver. Their regular saver is one of those accounts that you can only put a certain amount of money in. I think the maximum is £300. I think you have to put 75 in a month, between 75 and 300, and they'll give you 3.5% on that money. Well, at the moment, if you do that, they're going to give you 7% on that money, between £75 and £300. So that is a fairly loopy increase. I mean, God, at the beginning of the year, was you thinking that we were going to see 7% interest come to that? I mean, I certainly wasn't, and I appreciate that over. If you have the £3,600 to put in over the next 12 months, you're not going to get 7% because you can only put a certain amount of in it each month. So, you're only going to end up with maybe half of that or whatever it works out to be when you work it out. But for people who are just starting out saving, who only have £300, this is a good account. This is going to be really good for people. Plus, they're offering, I think it's 175 quid for you to switch to them. It's a good time to be in the retail space at the moment.
It looks like a very good place to be stashing an emergency fund or some part of an emergency fund if you need a bigger emergency fund than you have. I mean, that brings us nicely to our first kind of topic, but I also have an account like this. I have the sort of NatWest version of this where you can pop some money in and you get a pretty decent rate on it. You need to be a NatWest account holder of some other sort as well, I think, and whatever it is, I am that. So that's where I'm kind of currently siphoning bits of my money to. I'm a little bit unclear as to what happens when you start bumping up against the top end of what you're allowed to save in there, whether you have to keep paying in at lower rates or whether you can put it in and take it out, or what happens to the kind of interest over the top of that. But we'll figure that out when I get nearer the time and when it becomes relevant. It's going to be months and months for me until that happens. But yeah, I'm not averse to kind of picking up a bit of a decent interest rate on a savings account that can be used to house an emergency fund. My emergency fund's been sat there for ages doing not a lot, and I'd like to make that a bit bigger, to be honest, because I think with choppy times ahead and a recession and so on, never hurts to kind of increase the reserves that are available.
No, absolutely, I agree with you. I managed to, luckily enough, get into one of those limited edition Santander fixed bond thingy bond releases at 2.72. So I've got some of my emergency fund in that. I've got some of my emergency fund in a short term. I think it's a 6 months fix with Tandem as well, which gives about 4 and a bit % as well. I've got to be careful because I think if I keep it in these sort of 4% accounts, I'm going to crash into savings limits, and that just makes a bit of a sort of like tax reporting headache. So I'm trying to be careful, but it just like when there's so much risk in the market at the moment, when you're looking at it and you can see people like jumping to 7%, and yes, I know it's a headline rate and it's not really the rate you're going to get, but it's interesting, isn't it? I think there's some interesting times ahead for everybody.
Yeah, you agree with me, this is attractive. And when we start talking sort of 7% rather than, to be honest, 2% is enough to catch my attention with where rates have been recently. But 7% is the kind of territory that I don't remember seeing anywhere on a decent kind of savings account. I mean, this is pre-COVID and interest rates all coming down to try and keep people afloat and so on. I mean, this is really high. And if rates keep pushing like that, I know mortgages have kind of flattened off a little bit just at the moment in the UK, but they might well have some way to go if this keeps going.
It's interesting, isn't it? You would expect that mortgage overpayments are going to hit an all-time low for anybody who's in a fix anyway, because they're going to be starting a fix at maybe 2%. If you can earn 5% on your money, it makes no sense whatsoever to pay for your mortgage. You might as well jam it all in that account, and then when your fixed rate ends, you've got this big wodge of cash that you can, I mean, if you're still fixing at 2%, in 5 years' time or 4 years' time, whenever your fix comes out, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Obviously, if you're then going into a fix at 8 or 9 or 10%, then you might want to use that big wedge of cash to pay down your mortgage a little bit, which you will be able to do when you drop out of your fixed term rate. So I think there's a lot of choices for people out there, and I think Martin Lewis is going to be people's friend for the next sort of couple of years. He's got a busy old period ahead, hasn't he?
Martin Lewis might not be wrong on this kind of thing. I mean, it makes a lot of sense in these kind of times, I guess.